reminded me of a rat that I had seen as a child, and it just looked so frightened. He started a basketball game having to maintain a scoring average of 44.5 points. Pete just raced up and down that court. He had this demon look in his eyes, frantic, just to get off that next shot. I think of those floppy socks. You wonder if those socks were sagging because they didn't fit, as if he didn't have time to eat enough. Basketball owned him. Pete had a gift, and yet he was never satisfied.
Go back and read about Mozart. His Fifth Symphony had to be better than his Fourth. Harry Houdini had to do one better trick than the last one. John Kennedy had to make one better speech than his inauguration speech. Pete Maravich was the same way.
In a career filled with wonder and wizardry, team success was the one thing that was missing from Pete's resume. His frustration began at LSU, where his Tigers never made the NCAA tournament, even though Pete did everything asked of him.
Press kind of made it a directive that Pete needed to shoot like 40 times a game or we couldn't win. Pete has to shoot.
We had 6 games head-to-head. Pete averaged 52 points a game. But I think the closest that LSU ever came to beating us was 9 points.
Somebody came in and said, the Tigers lost by 3. And the guy said, oh, really? He said, how many did Pete get? That's what they were interested in. How many did Pete get?
He finally just given up and said, okay, I'll just be what they want me to be. I think that's part of what he became. I think he really just kind of caved into what people expected him to be.
And the older he got, it seemed like he became more of a burden to him.
And any team that got Pete Maravich wanted Pete Maravich the showman, wanted to fill the seat. Pete went to teams that built themselves around him and his image. It just kept reinforcing all the things that he did not want to have, and then kept reinforcing all the problems that he had.
Part of his package was a couple of extra loops and bells and whistles. It was who he was, it was how he played, it was how he got the joy out of playing. But there were plenty of times, I'm sure, when he probably wishes he could have made the straight play, and he felt obligated to kind of give the fans a show.
It took a toll on him as an individual. It took a toll on him psychologically. I kind of felt sorry for Pete. Sometimes he wished he were just an average player. He would have been relieved at times to not have that kind of pressure on him.
Here's a person who's been the star on every team that he's ever been on. You know, high school, collegiate player of the year, but he wanted a championship ring more than anything else.
I'm not a greedy person. I don't care to have 10 rings. I just want one.
The fact that he didn't get that ring haunted him. He believed that if he won a championship, that would mitigate all the criticism he got of being a one-man player, being a hot dog. That would be the ultimate revenge, and he was never able to get that.
He had a big void inside him, and he was always trying to fill that void.
He would begin searching for other avenues to bring him some contentment.
Everything he did, he was obsessed by.
It was known that Pete drank.
He basically became an alcoholic while in the NBA. He would start drinking in the locker room, in the bus, drink on the plane. He'd wake up at 11 o'clock the next morning and not even realize where he was. About 2 hours before game time, he would pump his adrenaline up to go out and put on the show and then do the whole thing over again the next day.
Just going from thing to thing, and then he would be obsessed with that, and then move on when that didn't bring him a certain contentment. Very intense nutrition, fasting.
Goat's milk.
Vegetarianism.
Be on an airplane with a full tomato, eating like an apple.
He'd be reading the labels on everything. He wouldn't eat this, wouldn't eat that.
Transcendental meditation, karate.
He'd be down at the karate gym at 8 o'clock in the morning till 9 at night, do drills all day long.
You might have somebody go and become a world karate champion.
He went to a black belt in less than a year.
He had some screwy ideas, you know, about
ufology.
UFOs landing on his roof. He believed people existed in outer space. Sometimes he was off the wall.
He was always searching for that happiness he had when he was a kid playing basketball. If I could go back to any time in my life, it'd be when I was a kid.
Showtime, number 44. Towards the end of his career, Pete's quest for happiness took him to Boston. He wanted that championship, but for the first time in his life, he was more of a sideshow than the main act.
He was like a punch-drunk fighter, trying to turn back the clock, trying to still make it happen again and relive those great moments, but you can't do it. He knew it was time to get out.
I remember getting a telephone call from him one morning, and, you know, very quietly, matter-of-factly, he said, Les, I'm leaving pro basketball, and it's a done deal.
But Pete's timing was typically poor. The year he retired, the Celtics won the title.
When Boston went on to win that championship without him, I mean, he was suicidal.
I used to drive my Porsche 140 miles an hour across the Causeway Bridge. Things were running through my mind like I just turned the wheel to the right 10 degrees. It looked like an accident. They'll say, what a tragedy.
And then he would have no more pain.
When we return, Pete leaves basketball and finds happiness as a father and a newfound faith in religion.
It was almost like a heroin addict. I'd played for 30 years, and all of a sudden, I just cold turkey quit basketball. I came home and became a recluse for almost 2 years. Literally stayed in my house. All during that time, I was trying to find answers in my life that I couldn't find.
He was lying in bed one night. It was late. He hadn't been able to fall asleep. And all of a sudden, he felt like electricity had hit him, and his fingers were shaking. And he called out in pain. And he said he heard God speak to him and say, come to me, and I'll help you.
He believed that God spoke to him that day. And from that moment on, he was transformed and found a new purpose in life that did bring him incredible satisfaction and incredible peace. He was a changed man.
I used to get asked the question all the time, what's it like being married to Pistol Pete? And the only thing I could tell them is, I don't know what it's like being married to Pistol Pete. I'm married to Pete Maravich, the person.
After a lengthy courtship, Pete and Jackie Maravich finally got married in 1976. They soon had 2 sons who quickly became as important to Pete as he once was to his father.
He was a very loving and giving person, a wonderful father. He loved his kids and devoted a lot of time to them, taking them to church, reading the Bible to them. Of course, they had a basketball in their hands when they were a year old. He was always working with them, shooting with them, showing them different things, but it didn't matter what they were as long as they had Christ in their life and they were happy doing what they wanted to do. He was so much happier, and he wanted to share that with everybody.
You very seldom saw him without a Bible in his hand. He was a tremendous speaker. He traveled all over the United States talking to Fellowship of Christian Athletes, young people. He was going to prisons, talking to guys on death row.
Every Thanksgiving, he would go to one of the neighborhoods, and he would buy 200 to 300 turkeys. And he would deliver them himself. He'd put them all in the trunk of his car.
He had a camp that he spent a lot of time with and a lot of money on. They learned about nutrition. They learned about proper exercise. They learned about Christianity. They learned about basketball. He became interested in a total human being, not just the skills of that human being.
He just seemed more relaxed, and there wasn't that haunted look in his eyes. That had gone. And he smiled. He smiled.
He wasn't a floppy-haired, floppy socks guy anymore. He was where you hope all people get to be comfortable with yourself. Nobody deserved it more than him.
He was absolutely candid and honest about himself and about what he wanted in life, and said, I could die tomorrow. I am now at peace with my God.
Not 1,000 NBA championships, not 1,000 Hall of Fame rings, not $100 billion would I trade for my position where I am right now.
But in the fall of 1986, Pete's faith was tested when his father was diagnosed with cancer. Press stubbornly refused traditional medical treatment, moved in to spend his last days with Pete, and like his son, became a born-again Christian. With their shared faith, the two Maravich men were finally able to make sense of their complex, lifelong relationship.
They had all these different conflicting relationships, and then Pete talked about how in the last year of Preston's life, Pete would give him his shots, Pete would carry him to bed.
Pete thought that was very much the way that Press used to carry him and take him to basketball camps or take him home after a game.
Their roles just completely reversed, and through that, there was this incredible, intense relationship that left such a vivid image in Pete's mind.
Pete delivered the eulogy, 2 hours, just talking about his father and himself and life after death and what this would mean. And he was spellbinding.
My dad was my hero. I wouldn't be in the position I am today if it hadn't been for my father.
He bent over and told his dad, he said, "I'll see you soon." Pete knew that he would see his dad again.
Up next, a life well lived and a legacy that will stay with us forever.
He was an extraordinary interview subject. What you want in a good interview is someone who has passion and who can laugh at themselves a little, and Pete had that ability. I mean, he could, if he were describing a play, he could put you on the floor. But he was a true born again. He had it in his heart. He deeply believed, he willingly, openly discussed his earlier life. But I had great respect for Pete. I really liked him. We really got along.
He had started complaining about how tired he was all the time. And that wasn't like him. I know he didn't look good. His coloring was changing, and he had lost weight. But he was the type that didn't like to go to doctors.
I get a package, and I open a package, and it's a Bible. I'm not the most religious person in the world, and my name is imprinted, a beautiful leather-embossed Bible. And I open a Bible, and there's a long, handwritten thing to me on the first page from Pete. You know, "Dear Larry, I hope this gives you inspiration as it has for me." And as I'm reading this, they announced a sports bulletin.
An American original died today, Pistol Pete Maravich. He was college basketball's all-time scoring champion and later a professional star. He died today during a pickup basketball game at a church in Pasadena, California. A heart attack is suspected.
Died playing the game he loved.
When they did an autopsy to find out why he collapsed on his basketball court, they found out that he was missing his right coronary artery. Born with it that way. A defective heart, basically half his heart wouldn't bump. I mean, it's almost stunning because here's a guy that ran his whole life, unlike Secretariat, who when they opened up his heart, he had an enlarged heart. His heart was bigger. He basically had a bigger engine than the horses he was running against. Pete had a smaller heart, but stronger in some ways.
He did not leave this earth not sure of himself and not satisfied with himself. He saw the light, and he was happy. He was at peace.
From childhood, Pete Maravich dedicated his life to basketball, and the results were historic. His college scoring records, the ones he set with uncommon flair, will likely stand forever, equaled only by his professional career, in which he was chosen as one of the top 50 players in the history of the NBA.
You can be the greatest on the face of the earth. That's something if you want to do that bad enough. They still talk about the wraparound behind the back pass, and something will happen to say, my God, he looks like Maravich. His legacy will live forever.
He broke the molds. He didn't do it the way people had always been taught. He He's like a guy who wins the Nobel Prize for some discovery he made 30 years ago. Well, Pete was that much of a revolutionary at the time.
He added something to the NBA that the NBA was lacking at a time when the game was not very popular.
His life was shortened. He really had a full life. And there's a legacy there. He crammed 100 years of life in 40 years. And when you look back and you examine those 40 years, there's something there for everybody to benefit from.